Now I have started.
And then, and then you also should remember to mute yourself
Yes, yes, correct. Yeah,
along with
correct.
everybody. Yes, because
Yes.
uh, okay. So welcome all of you. Um we will be now starting this lecture in short time. But before that, one quick announcement that today and then next Saturday we will have the last lecture of this series. This was kind of a additional bonus which we received from Professor Bhate, because initially what we planned, she was supposed to join the Kensei Foundation Visiting Professorship Program in the month of December. But however, that could not happen due to some health emergency at her side. But then, as a wonderful teacher as she is, and as a committed teacher, she said that she would like to start with something. And last time, so in February, actually, at that time, we already had Professor Gokhale, who joined his tenure as a Kensei Foundation visiting professor. So what we did is then we took a way out and we decided to have this lecture series. With 10 lectures introducing Panini and his Ashtadhyayi, and specifically his methodology to those newcomer students. And then now, after preparing the ground, I mean, it was in a way a good idea, and because we have now kind of prepared the ground for understanding Panini, and we are more or less now ready also to do some kind of serious reading in Ashtadhyayi. So, what is our next plan now? Professor Bhate today has joined us in a new capacity. So, let me also welcome her uh, to the Department of Pali as a Kensei Foundation visiting professor. So, she has joined her tenure, which started on 15th of April. So, from 15th of April to 14th of June, she will be with us as a Kensei Foundation visiting professor. This professorship was established in 2015 with the able support of the Kensei Foundation India, and the idea was to actually to bring uh, uh, noted scholars, internationally reputed scholars, senior professors in the field of Buddhist studies to Pune, and give the opportunity to students and faculty members to interact with them and to learn actually new things from these professors. Because we hardly get chance to see them. I mean, especially students. For students, it is very difficult to get really close to these scholars and to really learn from them one to one. I mean, this is a fortune which we had when we were doing our MA, and it was none other than Professor Bhate, who actually arranged all these things for us. So I remember during my tenure as an MA student, first of Sanskrit and then of Pali. At that time, she, being the head of the Department of Sanskrit and Prakrit Languages, invited so many scholars to the department. We had no vacations, so to say, for 4 years. And we had somebody or the other coming. And this included traditional Sanskrit scholars, Pandits, as well as modern scholars who are trained in Western methodology of research. And this has really, widened the horizons of our understanding and our approach to the Sanskrit studies and the study of these ancient languages. And when I got this opportunity, I thought that I should kind of carry forward what she has given to us, to our my students now, and to kind of by enabling them to have this chance to interact with scholars. And I'm very happy that luckily, I mean, we got the wonderful support from the Kensei Foundation, which is an international foundation which supports the study of Buddhism throughout the world, and they have kindly agreed to establish this visiting professorship. And our aim was not to invite a scholar for just a few lectures, couple of lectures here and there, but the main condition of this professorship agreement is that a scholar should stay with the department at least for 2 months. So at least 2 months is the duration. That can be, of course, extended, but at least 2 months, that's the duration. And the main idea was that the scholar can come here, interact with students, spend some time with them, not in the class, but also out of the class as well, because that makes a vast difference. And I'm really happy to share with all of you that until now, we have more than 15 scholars who have visited the Department of Pali at the Savitribai Phule Pune University under this program. And they have been staying with us and interacting with our students and faculty members. And this also helps in building up academic relationship, because the students, if they really want to pursue their future further studies in research and so on, they have these scholars now. They know these scholars personally, so that really helps a lot. And when you're reading a book of a particular scholar, it's a different thing. It's quite different from meeting a scholar and actually sitting face to face in front of him in a class and in a reading group, and also informally on some on some banquets and so on and so forth. So that's the idea, and I'm really happy that my teacher, who has given this to me, this inspiration and motivation, she is here now as a Kensei Foundation visiting professor, and my dream is really coming true. Um, so I'm really happy to have her as a Kensei Foundation visiting professor for her tenure of 2 months, starting from 15th of April till 14th of June. And during this visiting professorship tenure, now we are announcing a reading workshop. It will be a reading workshop. We'll be reading basically the Samasa section of the Kashika Vritti, and should be also looking at the parallel Chandra Vritti, and whenever possible, maybe can also give us some insight from the Nyasa. Why we are doing this is because now there are some of our students in the Department of Pali who are studying Pali grammars, and the grammars which are basically influenced by Panini and the Chandra system, and also the Katantra system. So my personal idea is that the students should know not just the Pali grammars, but they should also study these other three systems of Sanskrit grammar, so that they really can understand what the Pali grammarians are doing, and from where they are taking their theories, and how they are modifying these theories, and so on. To get that perspective, it is very important to study not just the Pali grammars, but to study even the Sanskrit grammars, which have been the models for the Pali grammarians. So that was the idea, and I thought that it will be a wonderful opportunity to study this Samasa section. And why we chose the Samasa section is that it's a compact section, as Professor Bhatia has already mentioned in her lectures. And this is something which we can try to achieve in the period of 2 months. This is what we are going to do. We'll again require a registration. We have already kind of put out a notice of this on the group, so I think most of you must have received it already. So if you are really willing, please register. It will be first lecture will be on Monday 20th, but that Saturday we will have the last lecture of our lecture series. And then a week after that, we will then have every Monday and Saturday, 4:30 to 6:30. We will be meeting for this reading session. So with this bit prolonged introduction of mine, I'll stop here now, and would request Professor Bhate to start today's lecture. I hope, Talat, you have started the recording already. So yeah, so
Yes, sir.
with these
Yes.
words, let me now request Professor Bhate to start her lecture now as a Kensei Foundation visiting professor at the Department of Pali. Yes, thank you.
So thank you, Mahesh, and hi everybody. So today we switch over to Tadhyuta section from the Samasa section, a still richer world of linguistic expressions, taking us closer to the social world of actual happening. But before we enter the Tadhyuta section, we come face to face with a small section dealing with feminine suffixes. And we will have to pay a brief visit to this section before we enter the Tadita section, because that also forms an important part of Panini's description of Sanskrit language. And therefore, we begin with the feminine section today, Striyam. So, Talat, please display the picture number 1, on which I have shown a small table containing the Stri Pratyayas.
Yes,
Okay?
madam. Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. It must have been emailed to all. Is it not so?
Yes, madam. We have done.
Okay, good.
Now, please see.
Okay.
Audience,
So-
please, anyone confirm it? Is it visible?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, the fourth adhyaya begins with the Adhikara Nyap Pratipadika, which we have seen during one of the sessions. And this Adhikara is followed by the rule listing 21 case endings. That also we have seen earlier, Saujasam, Chashtabhyam, etc., etc. And then commences the section dealing with the feminine cases, governed by the Adhikara Striyam. So you find Striyam is
Please mute your microphones. Everybody else, please, you're requested to please keep your mics muted. Yeah, thank you.
okay. Thank you. So you will find in the picture 1 the Adhikara Striyam. I forgot to put the number. It is 413, and there are about 10 feminine suffixes which are governed by this Adhikara, and I have shown all of them. These suffixes, they convey feminine gender. This diagram shows all these suffixes along with their illustrations. Yes, I have given them, some of them only. Actually, though I have given one illustration for each suffix, these suffixes, with the exception of one, that is T, they generate a large number of feminine nouns. And I have given only suffixes, but under each suffix, there are several rules also, giving a specific exceptions in terms of suffixes as well as stems. Some of these stems which are generated by these suffixes, they are restricted to domains such as Vedic literature, or they are limited to contexts such as young age. Say, for instance, there is a rule, Prathame Vayasi, or Vayasi Prathame, which teaches the suffix ni to convey feminine gender belonging to a person of young age. So we have forms like Kumari, Kishori, Taruni. But in case of Vruddha, it is not Vruddhi, it is Vruddha. Because Vruddha Stri doesn't belong to Prathama Vayaha. A look at the diagram shows again that some of the suffixes, they differ only in the Anubandhas, while their form is the same. And there are two such groups. Tap, Dap, Chap is one group, and Neep, Nish, Neen, they form yet another group. And if we remove the Anubandhas, they have the same form. Remove Pa and Ta, Da and Pa, Cha and Po, etc., etc. And you will find all the first three suffixes, they are of the form of A, and all the next three suffixes, they are of the form of E. And these anubandhas, they perform the function of indicating accent and a few other metalinguistic as well as non-metalinguistic functions. I think we have also seen some of them in one of the earlier sessions. Further, in case of two feminine formations, we find double suffixation. Thus, look at shpo, the next suffix. Shpo is not a single feminine suffix. It is followed by the addition of nish. And again, there is another suffix shyang, which is followed by the feminine suffix chap. And therefore, I have put a plus sign there. So, shpo plus nish together, they convey the feminine gender. Similarly, shyang plus chap together, they convey the feminine gender. And the examples are there. Just a glance at the examples. Aja, tap, Seema, dap, Kumudagandhya, chap, Nip, Kartri, Nish, we have two, Kumbhakari and Ganaki. And here I must tell you that there is a group of suffixes, feminine suffixes, which has again a very limited domain, and that is Pung Yoga. These suffixes are added to a stem only when the context is that of Pung Yoga, connection with a man, you can say. So virtually they are, they convey the meaning wife. So Ganakasya Patni Ganaki, Acharyasya Patni Acharyani. But if we have a woman teacher, then the feminine would be just tap, and we will have the form acharya. So this is the difference between two words, acharya and acharyani. And Kumbhakari is just, it is not necessarily the wife of the Kumbhakar, the pot maker, but it is a woman who makes pot. That is the difference between these two, but the suffix is the same, nish. And then for ngeen, we have the feminine word Shangaravi. Shpa plus nish gives you Gargyayani. For there is just one example. There are again many more. I have given one Kuru, but also Pangu and many other. For the suffix ti, we have only one example. Yunastihi is the rule, and Yuvati is the word. And that also, that suffix also is brought under Taddhita Adhikara. And then we have Shyang plus Chap, which gives us the forms like Kausalya. Now, about this double suffixation. Why didn't Panini teach just one suffix, like Shpi and Shyang? He splits it into two, Shpo and Nish, and here Shyang and Chap. Was it not possible for Panini to just make one single suffix like Shpi in place of Shpo and Nish, and Shyang in place of Shyang and Chap? And does this double suffixation not involve Prakriya Gaurava? A closer look at the rules which teach the additional feminine suffixes, it yields the answer. The rules, Shrid Gauradibhyascha, 4141. Did I mention it here? Yes, I have. I have mentioned it on the paper. Shrid Gauradibhyascha. This rule teaches Nish. And the other one is youngest chap, that also I have mentioned here. These rules are meant for other formations also. They are not meant for just these two cases. For instance, the rule Shrit Gauradibhyascha caters to other Shrit suffixes, like Shilpini Shvun, which gives you the form Nartaka. And then from Nartaka, we have to derive the feminine Nartaki. So Nartaka is derived from the suffix having sh as its anubandha, and therefore shrit gauradibhya sh is operative there also. And the same thing happens with also the rule youngest chap. It holds for both the suffixes yang and shyang, and thus it derives the word Kausalya from Kausalya, which I have put on the paper, which is a patronymic ending in yang. And again, well, there is a rule Vruddhet Kausala Jada Yang. I haven't put actually all the rules on the paper. But then there is also Kumudagandhya, which I have shown under chap, which is derived by adding both shyang and chap. So in this latter case also two meanings. Actually, in case of Kumudagandhya, this chap along with shyang conveys two meanings, apatya and feminine. It will be thus clear that although it was possible for Panini to make one single suffix like shpi and shyang to cater to these two feminine formations, Panini in his usual style tries to harness his rules to serve at multiple formations instead of providing for just one kind. And therefore, this apparent prakriya gaurava or prolixity in derivative procedure actually results in achieving brevity for Panini. And now we enter into proper Tadhita section. The word Tadhita, we begin with the very technical term Tadhita. It is a Tatpurusha compound of the phrase Tasmai Hitam. Tasmai Hitam is compounded into Tadhita by the rule Chaturthi Tadarthartha Bhuvi Chaturthi Tadarthartha Bali Hita something Rakshanaihi. It is in the second chapter. And Tasmai Hitam, interestingly, is one of the meanings of certain Tadhita suffixes enlisted in the 5th chapter, leading to formations like, I may mention that formation later on. Vatsebhya hitam vatsiyam, gobhya hitam gavyam. So Tasmai hitam is one of the Tadhita meanings. And therefore, this is a very peculiar case of a technical term. We cannot call it a sample for the class as we did in case of Tatpurusha and a few other technical terms. But it certainly refers to one of the meanings taught by the Tadhita suffixes and also recorded by Panini. Anyway, Panini must have borrowed this term from his predecessors because it occurs in Yaskar's Nirukta, where Yaskar has paired it with Samasa, and while giving the rules of Nirvachana, Yaskar says, Evam Tadhita Samasa Nirguyat, Tadhita Samaseshu Cho, Eka Parvasucho, Aneka Parvasucho, Purvam Purvam, Aparam Aparam, Pravibhajya Prabruyat, something like that. I may not be correct in my presentation, but something like that. So this is about the technical term Tadhita. Tadhita is the largest section of the Ashtadhyayi, extending over 2 adhyayas, 4th and 5th. And it comprises altogether 1115 sutras, almost 1/3 of the whole of the Ashtadhyayi. The derivatives treated in this section, they cover almost all aspects of human life. Personal, social, cultural, political, religious, and even emotional. There are, in fact, a few other singular features characterizing this section, due to which it stands out as a unique section in the Ashtadhyayi. And we are going to deal with those unique features a little later. So before proceeding for all these details, let us try to understand the derivative procedure of Taddhita. And this Taddhita section, as we found in case of Samasa section, is also headed by the Adhikara Samarthanam Prathamadva. So the word Samartha appears at two places, at two Adhikaras. In case of Samasa, we have Samartha Padavidhi, and in case of Taddhita, we have Samarthanam Prathamad Va. And that is also shown in this picture. And all the three words in this Adhikara, they continue throughout the section. So here, Va suggests that Taddhita is an optional derivation, except, of course, when there is a special mention of Nityam in a particular rule. And therefore, we have three options, as I have shown on the paper. There is a phrase, Upagoho Apatyam, descendant of Upago. We also have Samasa by option, Upagvapatyam, and Taddhita Aupagava. So Taddhita formation alternates with Samasa on the one hand and linguistic expression or phrase on the other hand. The term Prathamat refers to the first word of the meaning phrase. Samarthanam Prathamad kim bhavati pratyayah bhavati. Samarthanam Prathamat, because what is stated in the next sutras is pratyaya. So Prathamat ablative refers to or is connected with pratyayah. So this first word in each and every meaning phrase takes the suffix. And generally we find the Taddhit meanings or the meaning phrases in this Taddhita section, they contain a pronominal form. Like tasya in say tasya apatyam, tena rattam, tasmai hitam, tasya nivasaha, tatra tatra cha diyate, tad asya asti, tad asmin asti, and so on and so forth. Many tat forms are found in that. So it's a general pattern, to give the meaning with pronoun or a pronominal form or the form of the pronoun tat as the first word. And this pronoun tat stands for a pratipadika in general, pratipadika samanya nirdesha, we can say. Of course, this is not again very peculiar to Taddhita section, but we can also find it elsewhere. It is again Panini's, it's a part of Panini's descriptive technique, we can say, because in rules like Tasmin Niti Nirdishte Purvasya, Tasmadityuttarasya, Panini certainly uses the pronominal form for a common reference. Therefore, the word Prathamat ultimately denotes that the suffix is to be added to a pratipadika which is represented by the first in the meaning phrase or by that pronominal form in the meaning phrase. In the example, I think we saw it earlier, Dasharatha. Yes, I have given it here also, Dasharathasya apatyam. So we have this phrase as an illustration of the meaning tasya apatyam. So we have the phrase Dasharathasya apatyam. So Dasharatha is one such pratipadika because it stands for tasya, the pronominal form tasya in the phrase tasya apatyam. So we have Dasharathasya apatyam, and then Dasharatha takes this derivation, etc., etc. We may come to that a little later. First, let us finish this, the third one also in this Adhikara, Samartha. The word Samarthanam initially means Samanarthanam, as we have already seen this while discussing Samartha Padavidhi. And then it means that Taddhita meaning or Taddhita word Dasharathi means the same as Dasharathasya Apatyam. Further, it also denotes the meaning Sambandhartha, and this also we saw while dealing with Samasa. Sambandhartha or semantically connected or parasparanvitatva is Samarthya. So the words Dasharathasya and Apatyam, they are semantically connected with each other. And therefore, while discussing or while expressing the explaining the word Samartha, I have written on the paper, no Samarthya in Bharya Dasharathasya Apatyam Kausalyaya. So in this expression, Bharya Dasharathasya Apatyam Kausalyayaha or Kausalyayaha, we have actually two independent phrases, Bharya Dasharathasya and Apatyam Kausalyaya. And there is no semantic connection between Dasharathasya Apatyam. Well, it is quite clear. The meaning of Samartha holds here, and it tells us that since Dasharathasya and Apatya in this phrase are not connected, we cannot have the Tadjita Dasharati in this case. The meaning of the word Samartha has been further extended by later commentators to show a word which is a finished word, finished in the sense it ready to use word. So it's a ready to use pratipadika. Those who have studied Siddhanta Kaumudi, they might remember the word parinishthitattvam. Samarthyam parinishthitattvam kritasandhikaryatvam ityartha. So parinishthitattvam we keep aside for the time being. We concentrate on the meaning kritasandhikaryatvam. That means Samartha word means a word with all the internal sandhis completed. With all the internal sandhi, again, is a Lakshanika term. It stands for all kinds of grammatical operations. And therefore, I say it's a finished word in the sense that it is a ready to use pratipadika. And the example often quoted by these commentators is, I have given on the paper below, is Suthita. Suthitasya Apatyam. Suthita is a name of a person. While deriving or while starting the derivative procedure, we split the word into two, Su and Utthita. This is one way of deriving words in Paninian system, and this is known as Vibhajya Anvakyana Paksha. I have already referred to this. This is generally followed, and this is followed in accordance with Panini's practice or Panini's descriptive technique. So we put it like this: Su, Utthita, and then there is a suffix iya by the rule Ata iya. And at the next stage, we have the Sandhi. Su plus Utthita becomes Suthita, Suthita E, and then this Adi Vriddhi and all these things. I have not shown it because I have already shown it in case of Dasharatha, which we did not see, but we will see present. And then we have the form Sauthiti. Now, if we don't accept this new additional meaning of the word Samartha, what will happen? In case of Suthitasya Apatyam, when we split Su Utthita Iya, the rule teaching Adi Vriddhi will operate on the first two after the after Sa in the very first word Su. And then the form will be something different from Sauthiti. It will be Savuthiti, which is not desirable. So in order to avoid such wrong formations, the later grammatical tradition, they found it necessary to extend the meaning of the word Samartha or Samarthya so as to denote by the word Samartha that which is finished, ready to use. Kruta Sandhi Karya. And this is how, particularly in the domain of Taddhita derivation, this new meaning of the word Samartha came into existence. We don't find this meaning in Samasa section or in any other section, but in this particular section, it is there. Now, before we turn to the next picture, let us finish with this derivation. I have changed my method of talking to you in this section. Earlier, in Samasa section, I used to give derivation of each and every Samasa, but now here I gave only a specimen derivation, and this holds for all other derivations. I don't want to spend much time on this, giving this derivative procedure, which is almost the same in other cases. So, Dasharathasya apatyam, Dasharatha, ngas and inya. Ngas is the genitive singular suffix. Then at the next stage, we have Dasharatho and e. So, ngas has disappeared by the rule Supodhatu Pratipadika Yoga. All the case endings, they are dropped, as in the case of Samasa we have already seen. And further, we have Adi Vruddhi by the rule Tadditeshu Acham Adehi. Yit and Nit as well as Kit, Taddita suffixes, they cause Vruddhi of the initial syllable, initial vowel. And here we have O after Do of the Sharatha, which is the initial vowel, the first vowel. And therefore it is substituted by Vruddhi, that is A. So we have Dasharatha E. At the next stage, we have another rule, which is again operative in Taddhita section, Yasyeti cha, which teaches the elision of the final vowel, Ikare Taddhita cha pare Pratipadikantasiya lupasya. Something like that. I don't remember the exact vritti. Therefore, this final A is dropped and we have Dasharath E. Finally, we have Dasharathi. So, you should try to remember these two rules particularly, Taddhita Shvacham Adehe and Yasyati cha, which operate almost in, I should say 90% of the Taddhita derivations. So, with this very brief introduction, let us now turn to the next picture. Talat, please show the next picture. This gives you
Yes, madam.
glimpse
You
into the section. Okay.
Yeah, you can
This
see.
is
Yeah.
very, very brief, glimpse, but it
Yeah.
gives you in a nutshell an idea about what a Taddhita section contains. So I have divided the Taddhita section into two subsections. First of all, into Swarthe and Pararthe. But I must tell you at the same time that both the words Pararthe and Swarthe, they are absent in Panini. Panini never divides them into these two. Neither does he use these two terms, Swarthe and Pararthe. Of course, the word Swarthe is found in one of the Vartikas of Katyayana. Did I mention it here? No, I haven't, but doesn't matter. There is Vartika number 3 on Panini 5374, where Katyayana himself mentions the word Swarthe. Siddham tu yena kutsitadi vachanam tad yuktat Swarthe pratyaya vidana. So there is a group of rules, there is a section towards the end of the Taddhita section, which deals with suffixes which we can call Swarthe. The very term Swarthe denotes that these suffixes do not convey any additional meaning. And of course, some of them they do convey, but that is a different matter. I will explain all these things when we deal with that particular section. And this Swarthe section is further divided. You will see in the picture, it is divided into 3: Swarthika, Atyanta Swarthika, and Samasa. But first, let us try to Understand this Pararthe Tadhita. Pararthe, actually seriously, because I have used it simply
Please
to
mute
convey
yourself.
other than suffixes.
Lata madam.
Under this category, Pararthe, or you can say, of course, that Swarthika suffixes, they have an endocentric character, and Pararthe, they have an exocentric character, nature, because they deal with something which is other than the meaning of these components of the meaning phrases, and therefore they are Pararthe. In that sense, it is significant. But nonetheless, it is not used by neither by Panini nor by his followers. So under the category of this Pararthe, there are, to begin with, 5 pratyayadhikaras. I call them pratyayadhikaras because these adhikaras, they contain, each one of them, a particular pratyaya. And they are adhikaras because in that particular section, that pratyaya continues throughout that adhikar. So these 5 pratyayadhikaras give us pratyas an, thak, yat, cha, and thay, respectively. So it means that all the rules under the adhikara an, for instance, they teach the suffix an, except of course when it is superseded by another suffix, which is specifically mentioned in a rule. But an is the general suffix throughout the an adhikara, which begins with 4183 and continues up to 44, or continues up to 43 end, because 441 starts the thak adhikar. An adhikar is the largest adhikar in the Tadhita section. So whatever applies to or holds for an holds for the next suffixes thak, yat, and cha, etc. But as I told you, although an is a general suffix in that particular section, an is a number of times cancelled by another suffix which is specific in a specific context. We are at this moment not going into all these details because we don't have enough time to deal with all these things. At least we should have some general idea about the Tadhitas, and maybe those of you who are interested in further details, we can have a separate session for all those details later on. Further, within each pratyayadhikara, again look into the picture. Within each pratyayadhikara, there are different arthadhikaras. So I have given again illustrations only for an. That is the first pratyayadhikara. So an pratyayadhikara consists of 49 adhikaras, of which I have shown only 4 in this picture. I have shown only Tasya Apatyam is one arthadhikara, Tena Raktam Ragat is yet another, Tasya Nivasaha is third, Tatra Jataha is fourth, and there are many others, and total number is 49. So each one of these arthadhikara governs again a group of certain sutras, individual rules, and these sutras deal with individual cases, and sometimes they give different suffixes also. Say for instance, under the adhikara tasyapatyam, again I have shown some individual rules, but there are as many as 80 rules under the adhikara arthadhikara tasyapatyam, which comes under the pratyayadhikara and. From these 80 rules, I have given on the paper only 4: Ata iya, Yayiyoscha, Gargadibhyo Yay, and Ashwadibhya Fway. So in all these cases, you will find that although an is a general suffix in that adhikara. Here it is cancelled by iya. In the next tool, it is cancelled by yet another suffix which I have not mentioned. Probably it is pak. Then in the next tool, it is yai. And in the further next tool, it is fine. So different groups of words like akaranta pratipadikas, they take e, and then pratipadikas ending in ya or iya, they take another suffix. The pratipadikas belonging to gargadi class, they take ya, so and is cancelled in all such cases. So each of these arthadikaras, as I have shown in this picture, it governs a group of rules teaching different suffixes to different stems as exceptions to the general suffix and. So we can say that the whole of the Taddhita section has this kind of three-tier arrangement of rules, starting with the largest, or you can say the broader Pratyayadhikara, each covering several Arthadhikaras, and at a still lower level, each Arthadhikara covering several individual rules. Well, the picture shows only a few illustrations of Arthadhikaras, and again the illustrations for each of them here. But you can multiply all these illustrations by maybe by thousands. Thus, we again look into this paper and try to understand the illustrations. So we begin with the very first Tasyapatyam, which is now very well known to all of you, and therefore I have chosen this. Tasyapatyam is descendant. I have given two sets of examples here. In the first set, particularly the first two examples, they are of a very general nature. They denote what the tradition calls Anantarapatyam. They denote the immediate descendant or son. Thus, Upagoho Apatyam Upagavaha means the son of Upago. Or Dasharathasya Apatyam Dasharathi, as all of you know, Dasharathi is another name of Rama, the son of Dasharath. But in the next example, the last in the first set, I say Gargasya Gotra Patyam Gargya. So here we find that Panini has set up a special kind of apatya called Gotra. He defines it as Apatyam Pautra Prabhuti Gotram. So any descendant from grandson and further down, grandson, great grandson, great great grandson, and so on, so on, so on, so on, is called Gotra. So what is excluded from Gotrapatya is the immediate son, Anantarapatya. So there is a group of suffixes, or there is a group of derivatives which convey only Anantarapatya. There is a group of derivatives which convey Gotrapatya. And therefore we have here an example, Gargasya Gotrapatyam Gargyaha. That means any descendant of Garga from his grandson downwards, but not his son. Well, why did Panini do all this? Naturally, such kind of classification existed in the language that was known to him, that was spoken around him. And therefore, he teaches special suffixes to denote Gotra in certain cases. And in the second set of examples, you will find there is a third variety of apatya. This kind of apatya is called yuva. And Panini defines it as Jivatitu Vamshiye Yuva. It means that a Yuvapatya is a descendant whose father or any other elderly relative is alive. Jivati tu vamshye yuva. Vamshya, anyone belonging to the same genealogy, but he must be an elderly person, and therefore he must be either father or any, maybe his uncle or somebody else. So in this case also Panini teaches different suffixes in certain cases. And moreover, in this case, a yuvapatya suffix is added to a gotrapatya suffix. So we have again a case of a double suffixation. So in order to denote a yuvapatya, first we have to add a gotrapatya suffix, and then further we have to add a yuvapatya suffix. So here in the example of yuvapatya, I have shown upagoho yuvapatyam aupagavihi. Here we have double suffixation like upagoho gotrapatyam aupagavaha, and upagoho yuvapatyam aupagava plus iya becomes aupagavi. Similarly, gargasya yuvapatyam gargyayanaha. Here we have two suffixes. First, gargasya gotrapatyam gargyaha, and then gargasya yuvapatyam. Gargya takes another suffix phe, that is ayana, and then we have gargyayana. So in case of yuvapatya, we have double suffixation. Now this concept of apatya, classified into three categories of apatya as we have seen, is further extended by Panini to include also a king of a certain region. Something very interesting, and though Panini does not directly mention it, it is suggested by the technical term tadraj. There is a group of suffixes in the apadyadhikara towards the end of the apadyadhikara, which is called tadraja. So we have a group of suffixes. They are called tadraja suffixes, tadraja pratyaya. So the very term tadraj suggests that these suffixes, they convey the meaning raja. They are added to the words. If we glance through the rules in this section, this is what we understand, that they are added to the words denoting regions or denoting names of regions, like Kuru, Panchala, etc. And there is a rule, and I have mentioned that down below in the same page, Janapada Shabdat Kshatriyad Ay. This is a later addition I have made in this page, and there I'm very sorry I have made a star mark here, but I think and I hope you will be able to understand it. Janapada Shabdat Kshatriyad Ay is a rule which simply says that Ay suffix is added to a word conveying Janapada. Janapada means a region, which also denotes a Kshatriya, a warrior tribe. So there are certain words which convey at the same time a particular region as well as a particular warrior tribe. The name stands for both. In such cases, this extension of apatya is the meaning of the apatya is same. And this is what Katyayana says on this rule. Kshatriya samana shabdat janapadat tasya rajani apatyavat. And the example is Panchalanam Raja Panchalaha. The Vartika means that a patronymic suffix, apatyartha pratyaya, is added in the sense of a king to a word which denotes both a region and a warrior tribe. So Panchala is such a word, as I said a short while ago. It denotes a certain region as well as a warrior tribe. And thus we have Panchalanam Apatyam Raja Panchala. So a great cultural meaning is hidden actually in this idea of extending the meaning of apatya further to a king. It is a very good example of transmission of cultural context through linguistic expression. And this also is perfect evidence to Evans Panini's meticulous treatment of the linguistic data. And as I said, it also suggests the hidden cultural context that every king is a child of that particular region. So it is the duty of the subjects belonging to that region to protect the king as a child, and further, as every son is bound by duty to protect his parents, the king is also bound by duty to protect all the subjects. So this particular idea also is hidden behind this idea of extending the concept of apatya to a king. Now let us again cast a glance at some other Taddhita meanings which I have put on this paper, like Tena Raktam, etc., in order to understand the extent or the range of meaning covered by Taddhita suffixes. So here we have Sanskritam, mixed. So in this context, it means mixed or garnished. So the Na Sanskritam Dadikam. So it refers to some food. While preparing it, it is mixed with curds, and therefore it is Dadna Sanskritam Dadikam. I will be dealing with this food context towards the end of my session today. Then we have Tad Vahati. He carries that. So Ratham Vahati Rathyaha. So Rathya describes an animal which carries it. Shakatam Vahati Shakataha. And then we have Tasmai Hitam. We have already seen the example. Vatsebhyo Hitaha Vatsiyaha, that which is beneficial to the calves. Tena Kritam, purchased with that. So Saptatya Kritam Saptatikam, that which is purchased with 70, maybe rupees or nishkas or dinaras or whatever coin was in vogue at that time. So Saptatya Kritam Saptatikam. Then we have a meaning like, say, Tad Arhati, he deserves it. Shatam Arhati Shatyaha. So there is a particular, cloth or maybe some utensil or some item which is worth 100, you can say. So it deserves to be purchased with 100 rupees or something. That is Arhati. Next one is Tatra Tasya Iva. We have here an example of a composite meaning. So sometimes Panini gives composite meanings also in one and the same Arthadikara, Tatra Iva and Tasya Iva. And therefore we have two examples, Mathurayam Iva, Mathuravat Ayodhyayam Prasadaha, and Devadattasya Iva, Devadattavat Yajnadattasya Dantaha. So note the minute observation of this grammarian. He doesn't just say Tatra Iva or simply Tasya Iva, but he records both. Tatra Iva also is found in the language, and examples of Tasya Iva also are found, and he has recorded both of them. So these are very, very few examples. I'm not really satisfied with them. The Taddhita section gives far richer, linguistic data, which cannot be simply put into one paper, or even it cannot be just compressed into one single lecture. And you also will not be able to really appreciate it. Then we shift to the next Swarthika suffixes. So Swarthika suffixes are added to either to convey some specific aspect about the same, a stem, some feature, some facet of its meaning, or to convey nothing beyond the stem. They are just added like that. Sometimes we also, in our all vernaculars, we use redundant endings or redundant suffixes. Such suffixes, they are now known as Atyanta Swarthikas and also Samasantas. Even some Samasas, they take some suffixes without there being any addition to the meaning of the Samas. So they are Atyanta Swarthikas. Absolutely Swarthika, endocentric, they do not add in anything to the meaning. Exactly opposite to this Parartha. So the example of Swarthika I have put is, yes, Anukampayam Putra Kaha. So although it is Swarthika, it definitely implies or suggests some kind of attitude of the speaker towards the object. So Anukampayam Putra Ka. Instead of saying Putra, he says Putra Ka, Putra Gatahatvam, etc. So this suffix Ka does not convey anything beyond the word Putra, but it conveys Putra along with the feeling of Anukampa, the feeling of compassion in the mind of the speaker. So there are many more examples like this. Rasve, exactly opposite to Anukampa is also Kshepe is there. And if you want to abbreviate, if you don't want to say Devadatta, you can simply say Deva or simply say Datta or Deviya and so on. Whole number of suffixes. Variety of suffixes are there, even in Swarthika section. And then there is Ekadha. Did I put it here? Yes, Sankhya Vidharthe Dha. So here also there is no addition into the stem meaning. Ekadha Bhunte. So he eats, it conveys a manner, he eats once. Instead of saying ekada, he eats once. So this also is put in the Swarthika section. And Atyanta Swarthika section contains suffixes like an, and the example is Prajna Adibhyascha, Prajna eva Prajna. So there is no absolute difference between these two terms, Prajna and Prajna. But still there is an addition of the suffix and it becomes Prajna. Panini has taken note of even such redundant suffixation. Yes, and the final last illustration is of a Samasanta. Rajaha Sakibhyash Touch. So in a Tadhita Samasa, which ends with the Pratipadika Rajan, Ahan, and Sakhi, the Samasanta suffix touch is added. So instead of having the compound as Maharaja, we have Maharajaha. Then we have, instead of Rajasakhi, we have Rajasakhaha. All such Samasanta suffixes are treated towards the end of this Tadhita suffix, Tadhita section. And they are put in the Tadhita section because the grammatical operations which are applicable to other Tadhita suffixes, they are also applicable to Samasanta suffixes. The Anubandha function and all other things. So a cursory glance at the rules in this section further reveals some very distinct features of Tadhita section, and that we are now going to see. I am very sorry. I really feel sorry at the bottom of my heart that I cannot open this great treasure of arthadikaras and illustrations in this very short span of time. But I would at this juncture like to suggest, if possible, you can have a look into my book, a very small book on Tadditas, which describes the variety of Taddita meanings, and in the appendix you will find the list of pratyadhikaras and arthadhikaras, and if you just cast a glance at all these arthadhikaras, you will get some idea about the richness, the opulence of Sanskrit vocabulary, which is actually contributed by the Tadditas. Now let us try to get some idea, of course briefly, about the very, very distinct features of the Taddita section, which separates it from other sections in the Ashtadhyayi. The very first distinct characteristic of the meanings of different Taddita suffixes stated in this section is their lexical character. Now, will you show picture 3, Talab?
Yes, madam. Already I displayed. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thank you. So, Taddita suffixes, they always deal with lexical meanings. The arthadhikaras, if you just cast a glance at them, you will find that they deal with lexical meanings such as apatyam, raktam, vohati, nivasaha, bhavaha, deshaha. They are either in the form of nominals or they are in the form of verbs. Both kinds of meanings are there, but they are lexical meanings. And hardly do we come across meaning in terms of a karaka or any other grammatical category. This is a clear point of deviation from the treatment of krut suffixes which we are taught, to convey different karakas like kartru, karman. We have seen, for instance, lak karmani cha bhavecha karmakebhyaha, kartari krut, that also we have seen earlier, and then karmani upapade also, and akaritaricha, no, bhavecha akar, sorry. There is a special section which deals with bhave and other karakas, karturbhinna karakas. So, generally the meanings of the suffixes, they are conveyed or they are mentioned by Panini in terms of grammatical categories. They are hardly mentioned in terms of lexical categories. So grammatical categories such as bhava, bhuta, vartamana, they find a mention in krut section, for instance. So mention of lexical items as meanings, sometimes we come across also in krut section. Like say there is a rule, Arya Swami Vaishyayoho. So Arya is a krut formation, and Swami and Vaishya, Arya Swami Vaishya. So Swami Vaishya, they are lexical terms. Then Ajaryam Sangatam. So Ajarya is a krut formation. And these two rules say that the word Arya, say for instance, is used to refer to either a Swami or a Vaishya, a master or a merchant. Similarly, the word Ajarya is used to refer to Sangata, friendship. So these meanings, lexical meanings, they appear as reference there, not as meanings of suffixes. And what we find further is that generally such reference are found in Nipatan Sutras. Of course, sometimes we come across rules like Shilpini Shun, which I have mentioned here in this paper. Shilpini Shun, where we have a very clear-cut reference to a lexical meaning like Shilpin. This rule teaches the suffix shun to denote an artisan or an artist. Shilpini. Shilpini vachye or Shilpini boche is actually the question. So is the word Shilpin the meaning of the suffix, or it is the meaning of the formation, or it is the formation which denotes that meaning? That is actually the question here. And it's not a very difficult question. The answer is very clear, because all the Krut suffixes, they are assigned the task of conveying karakas like kartru, karman, etc. So the suffix in this context also, the suffix shun conveys kartru, and shilpin or artisan is the meaning which is denoted or which is suggested by the formation. So nartaka, rajaka, when they are derived with the help of this suffix shun, they refer to artisans. So artisan is the semantic field to which these derivatives are restricted or confined. So Krut rules of this type, in such rules, Panini teaches the Krut suffixes in the sense of kartru only, and the lexical meanings like shilpin, they are not directly conveyed, but they are suggested. So we have a very similar example also in Taddhita. We have shilpam, tad asya shilpam, and then mrudangaha shilpam asya is a phrase, and then we have the derivative mardangikaha. So it means a person skilled in the art of playing a drum. Now the question is, should we consider shilpam as the meaning directly denoted by the suffix tak? Obviously not, because as in the case of the Krut suffix, here also this suffix thak does not directly convey the meaning shilpa, because lexical meaning being conveyed by a suffix, this idea does not quite fit with the descriptive technique of Panini, who elsewhere always attaches grammatical meanings to his suffixes. So we therefore have to maintain that the lexical meanings stated in the Taddhita section also are not directly conveyed, but they are suggested by Taddhita suffixes. I went to all these details because there has been a lot of discussion in the latest semantic texts, semantics of grammar, or even while debating with Mimamsakas and Nayayikas, the grammarians face this problem regarding the meaning of suffixes, and therefore we have to be very clear about whether the suffixes taught by Panini convey any lexical meaning or they convey just grammatical meanings. But in this case, we have to say that the Taddhita section slightly deviates from other sections, because the meanings are in lexical terms and yet they are not conveyed. They are not directly conveyed. But then another question arises. What do the Taddhita suffixes convey in that case? Do they convey any meaning or not directly? Because the meanings like shilpo, etc., they are finally conveyed by the derivatives, or they are connected with the derivatives. So what do the Taddhita suffixes convey? What is their meaning? And the answer we get after the scrutiny of the meanings is that a karaka like kartru or karman or any other grammatical category like bhava, etc., they are also not directly but indirectly through the meaning phrases, they are also denoted or conveyed by Taddhita suffixes. But they are not directly conveyed as they are by Krut suffixes. So here the function of the tadyita suffixes is not to directly convey any meaning, but to indirectly convey the karaka or the grammatical meaning through the meaning phrase. Like tena raktam. Here we have the karana, which is indirectly conveyed or suggested by the tadyita suffix. Let us now turn to the other remarkable speciality of this section. Here I have enlisted again, look at the picture. I have enlisted a few arthadikaras. And if you cast a glance over them, you can immediately see the variations in their phrasing. Though most of the arthadikaras, as we have seen, they contain the pronominal form, like tat, tena, tasya, tasmin, tatra, etc. Sometimes these pronominal forms, they are directly mentioned in the rule, and sometimes they are anurutta in the subsequent rules. But sometimes we do come across a pratipadika, which is directly mentioned. And here, look at the first example. We have tasya apatyam, and in contrast to that, we have a rule like dharma patyartha nyayad anapeti. So actually, if we accept this pronominal form and the lexical meaning as a pattern of giving a meaning phrase, then this second rule should have been, as I have put it in the bracket, tasmad anapetam dharma patyartha nyaya. So to fit into that particular pattern, Panini should have phrased this rule as tasmad anapetam dharma patyartha nyaya. Exactly in the same manner as, now look at rule 3, tena raktam ragat. Here Panini doesn't say ragad rakte, like dharma patyartha nyaya danapeti. So immediately we can understand the variation in such cases. Then again 3 and 4, tena raktam ragat, and here fourth, tad vahati ratha yuga prasangam. So why doesn't Panini say tad vahati ratha yuga prasangat? He retains the accusative ratha yuga prasangam, and he doesn't use the ablative here, as he uses the ablative in the above case ragat. Here also he could have said ragena raktam. So either he could have said ragena raktam, or he could have said tadvati rathayuga prasangat. Then there is another example, actually a pair of rules, tasya vikaraha, and further we have avayavecha pranyaushadhi vrukshepya. Tasya vikaraha, a modification of that, and also a part of that avayav. In a certain group of rules, both these meanings, they continue together, tasya vikaraha and tasya avayava. And you will find even the number shows that they are just close to each other, 134 and 135, and both together they follow. Now here what we find is that vikaraha is used in the nominative, whereas the meaning avayava is used in the next rule as avayave, that is in the locative. So why doesn't Panini here phrase the rule as avayavascha pranyaushadhi vrukshepya? Or he could have said vikare, or he could have said vikara avayavayo, something like that. And then further, tasya dakshina yajnakhyebhyah. So tasya dakshina is the meaning, and yajnakhyebhyah refers to the set of pratipadikas to which the suffix is added in this particular meaning, tasya dakshina. So yajnakhyebhyah pratipadikebhyah tasya dakshina iti arte pratyaya bhavati. And then we have a rule like shabda darduram karoti. So Panini doesn't mention tat or nothing like that. So he should have actually mentioned here tat karoti shabda dardurabhyam. He should say shabda darduram, but shabda dardurabhyam. And well, I can go on adding many more examples of this type. And that will explain the multiple ways of phrasing Arthadikaras. In fact, I remember long time ago, I wrote an article on this, which is published in New and Indian Antiquary, most probably. Sorry, I don't have a copy of that article with me, but perhaps I don't know how to find it. Also, I cannot tell you. But I have written an elaborate article on the variations in these Arthadikaras. So we have yet another case of Panini as a variationist. Those of you who know Paul Kiparsky's book Panini as a variationist, for them, there will be some meaning in what I say, the another case of Panini as a variationist. So the first case of Panini as a variationist is discussed by Paul Kiparsky, and there we find Panini as a variationist in describing options. So he uses three options: va, vibhasha, and anyatarasya. Is this variation or lack of following a uniform pattern? As I said, is it a purposeful act of Panini, or was it required for some purpose, or does it suggest that the sutras come from different sources and Panini has retained the phrasing as they were borrowed by him and he kept them ad verbatim? Very difficult to answer. At least I cannot give any decisive answer. But yes, we do come across variations of these types in Tadvita section, and elsewhere we do not come across variations to such an extent. Of course, in Kuru section also we do come across some kind of variation, but not to that extent. And therefore, this reminds me of a long article by S.D. Joshi and Professor Ruth Bergen on Tadvita and Samasas, and they have claimed that these two sections, they do not come from Panini's pen, and it is very likely that they are at some point of time in the history of the restructuring of Ashtadhyayi. They were added to the original text of Ashtadhyayi. Anyway, we are not going to debate on this point right at this moment. And this is really a very, very controversial subject, because they have, as they, in their own words, they have done a major surgery into the text of the Ashtadhyayi. But this particular, feature of the Tadvita rules supports their hypothesis to some extent. Well, a careful study of these Arthadikaras can certainly help reconstruct the social, cultural, political history of the period in which Panini lived. Of course, they are very rich in all these cultural, social contexts. As I said earlier, I could not really give you even a glimpse of them. I remember one book by Vasudev Sharan Agrawal called India as Known to Panini, in which he has extensively drawn upon Tadvita and Krut sections to reconstruct the history and to portray the picture of the society during Panini's time. Well, important for me, of course, are the references to naturally to kitchen, cooking, and eatables. So just to give you some idea about the rich field covered by Panini, I just give you a small section as an example to show with how many details of a particular context Panini deals. And here I have given a list of say at about 8 rules. Even this is not an exhaustive list. These arthadikaras at the end of this third paper, towards the end, you'll see arthadikaras dealing with kitchen, cooking, food, etc. So this is something you may find interesting towards the end of today's session. And let us just try to look at these arthadikaras, and that will give us some idea about how Panini peeped even into the kitchen, and he was conversant even with the details of cooking, recipes, and even serving food. Say, for instance, take the very first rule, Tatra Udhrutam Amatrikya. So the meaning is Tatra Udhrutam. Udhruta means taken out or drawn out. Drawn out in this. This is the meaning of the Tadita. And this suffix is added in this sense to words which denote amatras. Amatra is a utensil, a pot, any kind of a utensil which is used in cooking. So the example given is Sharave Udhrutaha Sharavaha Odanaha. So this Tadita derivative qualifies a food item which is taken out in a serving plate. So Sharava is a platter, or you can call it a serving plate. So from the cooking pot, you can call it from the cooker, rice is taken out into a sharava. And even for such rice which is taken out in a particular serving bowl or serving platter, there is a Tadita word, Sharavo. The meaning of Sharavo is rice taken out in a serving bowl. Look at the richness of the language that was used during Panini's time. And then we have the rule, Sanskritam Bhakshaha. Bhakshaha again refers to eatable. And here we have Tatra, Anuvritta continued from the earlier context. So Tatra Sanskritam Bhaksha. Sanskritam here means not mixed, of course, but dressed. In culinary terminology, we can call it dressed. So Dadni Sanskritam Dadhikam. So Dadhikam describes, the word Dadhikam describes, or it qualifies, it's an adjective of a word denoting, say, you can call it salad or something. So it's a salad or some similar eatable which is dressed in curd. So there used to be dressing. Panini was quite aware of this particular culinary art, you can call it, Sanskrita. And then there are several other examples, and there are also a couple of rules under this adhikar. I have chosen only one for each. Dadni Sanskritam Dadhikam. And again, it's very interesting to note that we also have yet another Tadita Arthadhikara containing the word Sanskritam. But this time it is Tena Sanskritam. Earlier it was Tat Sanskritam. And look again at the nuance of the meaning. There is a slight difference, and this subtle difference also is noted by Pani. So here it is Tena Sanskritam. Earlier it was Tatra Sanskritam. And when it is Tena Sanskritam, there is a slight change in the meaning, and it means not mixed, but it is made tasty. So Maricha is black pepper. So what is the function of black pepper in cooking? Those of you who cook, they might be knowing that black pepper usually we use to add to the taste of a particular food item. So marichaihi sanskritam marchikam. So although the word Sanskrita is used also in this, there is a slight difference. In one case it is connected with locative, in another case it is connected with instrumental, and that again causes a subtle difference in the meaning of the same word Sanskrita. And we have two different items, food items on the kitchen table, which are used to serve two different functions. There is dadhi and then there is maricha. But dadhi serves a different purpose and maricha serves yet another purpose. And then we have yet one more meaning, sansrushti. And here the word tena is continued from the earlier context. So tena sansrushtam. Sansrushta again is, it is mixed, you can say. And we have an example, mudgaihi sansrushtaha maudgaha udana. Mudga is some kind of pulses. They also translated as beans, something like that. But those, I think Indians particularly know the meaning of mudga as moog or something similar to that in maybe some different language, like Gujaratis might be calling it something different, Bengalis, but it is in Marathi we call it muga. So mudga is a kind of a pulse. So mudgena sansrushtaha maudgaha udanaha, so mixed with mudgas. So here also the function is slightly different from dadicha and maricha. And then further we have vyanjanaihi upasikte. Vyanjana, we also use this word vyanjana in modern Indian vernaculars. Vyanjana is a kind of, a condiment. So it is to be sprinkled. So supena upasiktaha saupaha udana. Vyanjanaihi upasikta. So there are various kinds, Sanskrita, Sansrushta, Upasikta, and there are many other also meanings which I have not included in this list. So Vyanjanaihi upasikte saupaha udana, rice sprinkled with soup. Then we have another meaning, hitam bhakshaha. Now look here, Panini has also a sense of, health consciousness. He is also conscious about health while eating. So he tells you which is beneficial or not, and he finds that there are certain words derived from eatables which tell you that this particular eatable is good for health or health of a certain person. So hitam bhakshaha gives you an illustration example. Apupaha hitaha asmai apupika. So apupika is a name of a person. Now look, even the eatables, they go to derive the names of persons. Apupika means one for whom eating cakes not in the modern sense of the term, cakes of certain kind. The cakes are prepared in a very different manner, not the way they are done today. They are beneficial for him. So it is better he should eat such kinds of apupas, and then his health will be all right. So even to that extent, Panini has recorded details from food items in Taddhita section. Of course, they were there before him. So it was a language that was rich, but to capture the richness of a language is also the skill of the grammarian, which Panini has shown. And then we have an example, Sambhavati, Avaharati, Pachati. 3 meanings are put together in one rule. Sambhavati, Avaharati, and Pachati, and I think the suffix is tucked here. So the examples we get is Prastham, Sambhavati, Prastiki. So Prastiki, Prastha is a kind of a measurement, similar to say 1 liter or 2 kilos or maybe, I don't know, something like that. Prastham, Sambhavati, Prastiki, Sthali. So it is equivalent to, what is the capacity of this cooker? We can, when we go to the market, we ask, and they say that it is a 2-liter cooker, 5-liter cooker, 6-liter cooker. So this is Prastiki Sthali. So Prastiki Sthali means a particular cooking pot which can hold 1 prastha of rice or 1 prastha of grain. Similarly, Avaharati and also Pachati. So I have given the example of Pachati. Prastham, Pachati, Prastiki, Brahmani. So Brahmani refers to a female cook. Why Brahmani is employed here, I don't know. But anyway, quite often they use Brahmani. So this Brahmani is skilled in cooking 1 prastha of rice. So she she has no capacity to cook more than 1 prastha. Therefore, Prastiki Brahmani. And then we have Tad Asmai Diyate Niyuktam. I have deliberately chosen this example to show that people were eating non-vegetarian food during that period. There are actually many other illustrations. This is not the topic of our discussion today, but non-vegetarianism was very much in vogue in ancient society. So, Tad Asmai Diyate Niyuktam means that person to whom this certain kind of food is regularly given. It is ordered or it is commanded. So, Maunsaudanam Diyate Niyuktam Asmai Asa Maunsaudanikaha. So, here is a person to whom it is always decided, there is a mandate or there is an order, command to give meat rice. Tad Asmai Diyate Niyuktam. Maunsaudanam Diyate Asmai Maunsaudanikaha. So after reading such meanings, which are confined to cooking and kitchen, and there are quite a few more, but I haven't taken all of them here. So who would agree to the hypothesis that Sanskrit was spoken during Panini's time only by a priestly class, and that too in a ritual context? There are quite a few scholars. I don't want to mention their names, but they are of the opinion. Generally, whenever I read about whether Sanskrit was a spoken language during Panini's time, I find the statements that it was spoken, but in a very limited circle, only by priests, and also in very limited context. But when you look at this richness of vocabulary covering so many domains, so many areas of social behavior, human behavior, it is very difficult to accept that Sanskrit was spoken in a very limited area. It must have been a spoken language, and particularly when Panini even takes a peep into the kitchen, and there are several hundred derivatives which refer to just kitchen items, recipes, varieties of methods of cooking and all that, which are reflected in all such formations. Well, I feel even women must have been also speaking Sanskrit during those days, though no scholar has so far come forward to say that women were speaking Sanskrit, at least at one point of time, at least during Panini's time. I really don't know, but I myself would always like to think that everyone in the society, including Stri Shudras, they were speaking Sanskrit at some point of time in the history. but gradually, as you know, the rest of the history, I don't need to repeat it. Anyway, I must stop here because I think it's time, for question and answer session. So I thank you very much. And you can certainly add to my knowledge by giving your observations. Thanks, Mahesh, also for saying kind words every time when you introduce me.
So the floor is now open for discussion, and if there are any comments, questions, please feel free. You can raise your hand, and then we can announce the name, and you can ask your question.
If possible, show your face also.
Sorry?
If possible, show your face also.
Yes. Yeah, please turn on your video and then you can ask questions.
While replying, I don't know where I should look at. Or otherwise, I will turn off my video. That is also another option for me.
Madam, now Ashwini, she has raised her hand. So please, Ashwini, unmute yourself and please turn on your video and ask question.
Okay, thank you. हॅलो, नमस्कार
Yes.
मॅडम.
नमस्कार.
माझा एक प्रश्न होता. नर्तकी आणि नर्तिका या दोन्हीमध्ये अर्थांच्या दृष्टीने काय फरक आहे आणि प्रत्यय कोणता?
माझ्या माहितीप्रमाणे नर्तिका हा शब्द संस्कृतमध्ये डिराव होत नाही.
ओके.
त्याच्या अर्थात फरक असण्याचा काही संबंधच नाही. नर्तकी इज अ प्रॉपर संस्कृत वर्ड.
हा, पण आता बऱ्याच ठिकाणी हा बघितला जातो, तर त्यासाठी मग आपण काही
रूढी झालेली आहे ती एवढीच. कारण ते काय ते आ प्रत्यय लावतात आणि नर्तिका करून टाकतात.
ओके ओके, ठीक आहे, चालेल. थँक्यू मॅडम.
Hello, can I ask one question?
Please, Nidhi, turn on your video.
Yes, I have done that.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned one book of Agarwal, India as known to Panini.
Agrawal, yeah.
Yeah. So I always wonder, because the hypothesis or whatever he has mentioned, it's all based on the examples given for the rules. And we don't know whether these examples were also accepted by, means Panini has never given any rule with examples. We just get rules from Panini, and the examples we come across, all the examples from Kashika or Siddhanta. First time the rules are the examples are given Patanjali or Katyan. We don't have anything directly, so Patanjali. So I wonder whether we should say that India known to Patanjali was expected by him, or it is really India known to Panini in the real sense.
India as known to Patanjali is yet another book for your information. That was not by Agrawal. I think it was written by somebody else. Okay. But anyway, this is a good question, and I also had this question in my mind when I read this book. But you know, there is what should I say? There is a clue in Panini's sutras to know which particular formations must have been known to Panini. And the clue is, take for instance this Taddhita section, Tad Vahati Ratha Yuga Prasangam. So Panini actually gives you the formations, Ratha Yuga Prasanga. Ratham Vahati Ratya is not an example given by Kastika or Bhashika. Ratya is very much known to Panini. So the vocabulary also is given to some extent by Panini, side by side with giving the derivations. Nipatana is yet another thing. But even when he gives formations like Tadvahati Ratayuga Prasangam, then even in Tasyapatyam Adhikara, he gives you, special Pratipadikas. He mentions a number of times special Pratipadikas, special roots, specific cases. So if you collect all such cases, you can certainly say that all these words, they did exist during Panini's time. That is number one. So they are clear-cut Paninian. They belong clear-cut to Paninian vocabulary. There should be no doubt about it, because they very much make an appearance in Panini's grammar, though not as derived words, but as a part of the derivative process, isn't it?
Yes.
Then take a case like Shilpinishwan. So when we have a rule like Shilpinishwan, and we do come across examples like Nartaka in pre-Paninian literature, say for instance, there is every reason to believe that the word Nartaka and the art of dancing, they did exist during Panini's. And the third clue to understand what really existed during Panini's time is the attested examples in pre-Paninian literature. And perhaps you might be knowing that some of my own students, they took up this topic as for their PhD research. Attestations for samasas, attestations for taddhitas from pre-Paninian literature. And then only we can claim with certainty that such examples, they did exist during Panini's time. Even you take an example like samasa section, Panini gives you accent of certain samasas, and he says Chaurasya Kulam must be accented. Panini doesn't mention actually the samasa Chaurasya. So Chaurasya Kulam must have existed in Panini's. So some indirect references also can be taken to be, or can be transformed into the direct vocabulary. Can you not say like this?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Now
This is how we construct the Sanskrit language that was spoken during Panini's.
It's clear.
I know Vasadhan Agrawal and even the other author, they have made all this confusion, and they have borrowed examples from Kashika and also from later texts. And they have imposed them on Panini or Panini's time. So this anachronism, yes, it does happen.
Yes.
But we have to be very careful, and Nirakshira Nyayena, we have to make a selection. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. It's all clear now.
Sir, I think there is no question. So, sir?
Yes, if there are any last minute questions, if not, then maybe we can stop here for today. And so, are there any more questions?
No, sir, it seems no. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I think then we can probably stop here for today. And the last lecture of the series will be on Saturday. And the next Saturday, that will be the last lecture of the series. And on Tuesday, we are starting this reading workshop. Please note that registration is mandatory for this workshop. And as I mentioned last time, that this lectures will have also some kind of registration fees for students, for people joining from outside the Pune University. So please, if you haven't done the registration, you can still do it. And or if you want to spread the news, you can also spread it. You're free to do so. So we'll meet on Tuesday for the workshop group, of course, and for the lecture regularly we'll meet on Saturday at 5 p.m. So for the workshop, we are meeting at 4:30 on Tuesday. So with these words, then I thank Professor Bhate and all of you for joining us today, and thank Talat for her assistance. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, and be healthy, be safe. See you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and bye-bye.
Thank you.